Peter B. Collins News and Comment. It's Monday, November 21st, 2016. The Thanksgiving holiday approaches, a short work week for many Americans, and it's moving week here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast. We're pulling the plug on our secret studio, at least this location, after, I can't recall, 15 or 16 years in this building. And we're moving the secret studio across town to a new location. We'll upgrade our facilities and our internet speeds. That's been one of the problems here. And we're also going to lower the rent. So it's worth all of the effort. But it's difficult to go through years and years of files and books and materials and recordings and decide what to do with it all. And that's what I've got in front of me for the next few days. So I've got a podcast for you today, a podcast tomorrow, then we'll take a break and hope to return next Monday if all of the switches don't produce glitches. So stand by for all of the action. Last night, I was flipping across the television screen, and Sunday night is a dead zone. There's a lot of canned programming on. But news was breaking from North Dakota, and the corporate media ignored it. Even when I watched a local news report, all I got was the local fuzz and was. Yes, if it bleeds, it leads. But nothing from Standing Rock. The only coverage I could find was on Facebook Live. There also may have been a Periscope feed. I didn't actually look for that. But it was a crackdown by the law enforcement authorities on the people who call themselves water protectors, the protesters of the Dakota Access Pipeline, and it was a very ugly scene. 26 degrees Fahrenheit, and law enforcement chose to use water cannons on protesters. Now, the mouthpiece for local law enforcement tried to lie about it, saying, oh, well, there were fires, and some of our flares started fires, and so we used the water cannon to put out the fires. Well, I saw the live feed, and I want to credit the feisty media activists of Unicorn Riot, and in particular, a man named Kevin Gilbert. He spells Gilbert with 2 T's at the end. And he sports what I would call an Australian accent, but he didn't confirm that for me. But he was live streaming video from a vantage point where he still had internet access, and his camera phone was fuzzy at times, pixelated at other times. But I was able to vividly see how those water cannon were aimed on protesters, said to number about 400, and they were holding a position on a highway bridge. They were blocked in on both sides, and the protesters, water protectors if you prefer, said that they had taken action because the authorities had not removed a burned-out shell of a military vehicle, and I don't know how it got that way, but it was blocking this bridge. And what that meant is that emergency crew access to the Standing Rock camp, well, it requires a much longer drive and adds about 30 minutes to an emergency response. And so, in their own interests, the protesters were removing this to unblock the bridge, and they were boxed in by the authorities. They were not only pummeled with the water cannon in freezing temperatures, they were also subjected to flashbangs, to tear gas, and to mace. And one description is that at one point they fired 20 mace canisters in a 5-minute period. And this resulted in a number of individuals losing control of their bowel functions. Now, that's pretty disgusting. It really is. And to cage people in and then use these weapons, which are described as less lethal, I'm sorry, these are acts of terrorism by law enforcement. They are seeking a confrontation with peaceful protesters. And not only this is a very serious situation that begs the attention of the White House, the president, I believe, is returning from Peru. And while he has made noises about trying to broker some outcome of this protest, It is inexcusable for the president to remain silent and inactive any further. He's a lame duck, for Christ's sake. And if he really believes the things he's been saying about climate change, he would speak up for or on behalf of these water protector protesters. And I perused the corporate media. I didn't find any. I don't watch morning television, so if there was a report there on one of the network morning shows, that's possible. But the New York Times doesn't cover it on the homepage of its website today. My local San Francisco Chronicle didn't have any mention of it. The Guardian newspaper and Vice News both did cover the events at Standing Rock last night. And I'm linking to an excellent report by Kevin Gostola at Shadowproof to help you get more information on this crackdown that occurred last night. And what really bothers me, as I say in the headline today, is the corporate media refuses to cover obvious breaking news of government excessive force, militarized response. And instead, they subject us to this coverage of Donald Trump's trivial tweets. Now, the New York Times gets it right when they say that he has turned the process of forming a government into a Trump-branded made-for-television spectacle. They describe it as a pageant, and he used to own a beauty pageant, and this is an ugly pageant, as he parades some of the darkest creatures in American politics. And I don't for a minute, well, I could be wrong about this because it's so hard to predict what Trump will do, but his weekend meeting with Mitt Romney, I think, was just FaceTime. I can't imagine that he would name Mitt Romney as Secretary of State as is being hinted. But we saw Trump over the weekend tweet several times about the little commentary that his vice president-to-be, Mike Pence, received when he went to the Broadway show Hamilton on Friday night. And if we're going to have a meddler-in-chief who lowers himself to getting involved in little squabbles, he even wrote a critical review of Alec Baldwin's portrayal of the Donald on Saturday Night Live. And I thought it was pretty well written. It was accurate in a satirical sense. And yet Trump, poses as a critic now. He said that he's heard that let me see if I have a quote for it here. He said, the cast and producers of Hamilton, which I hear is highly overrated, should immediately apologize to Mike Pence for their terrible behavior. So he works in a critic role, a theater critic's role. I mean, and the media amplifies every little tweet this guy puts out. And I refuse to become his 29th million follower, okay? I am not going to read his tweets every day. Now, we also learned that quietly over the weekend, Donald Trump signaled that he is settling the lawsuit over the scam that he called Trump University. It was a university in no way, shape, or form. And it defrauded thousands of individuals who formed a class action, filed a lawsuit, put it in front of this so-called Mexican judge. His name is Curiel, Gonzalo Curiel. And, of course, he's an American citizen who was born in Indiana, and Trump injected racism into those proceedings. So they settled for $25 million. $21 million will be paid out to those who sued in California, the other $4 million in New York State. And, this is, for me, adequate resolution of these issues. But Trump tweeted again that, he was going to win this case, but he settled it because he's so busy being presidential and doing Broadway theater reviews and critiquing people who criticize or offer a message to his vice president. So it is truly bizarre, and we've just got to hold on for a lot of uncharted territory here. Here's a bad idea. President Obama has been hinting to friends and supporters that unlike his predecessor, George W. Bush, who left the White House, went into seclusion, painted portraits of his friends that he met as president, And George W. Bush, to his credit, and I have very little good to say about that man, has just kept quiet. And Barack Obama wants to defend his legacy by staying in the public debate. And if you've heard my arguments about how Barack Obama as president paved the way for the Trump presidency, you'll understand why I think this is a bad idea. And I have friends who have this rosy impression of Obama. He was a great president. And certainly you compare him to Trump, he is a much higher grade of human being. But his policies, his maneuvering of the Democratic Party into a clear corporate party that supports his wars, his authority to kill people with drones, the ongoing surveillance. And Obama really didn't fix the economy for the people at the bottom who voted for Donald Trump. And so I can understand why he wants to do it. I can understand why people who still have a very positive opinion of Barack Obama would think this is a great idea. But the New York Times article covering this mentions Neera Tanden, president of the Center for American Progress. And after her emails were released in the John Podesta email hack and dump, we learned about who she is, about how pro-Israel she is, about how she has censored people at the Center for American Progress who published articles that support the Palestinians' rights or were critical of the State of Israel and its policies. And Obama doesn't get it. If he thinks that he has good advice to give to the Democratic Party in the near future. I mean, this is right up there with people who have suggested that he belongs on the Supreme Court. Well, that's not even possible now, but I thought it was a bad idea when it surfaced. Well, they weren't wearing sheets with eye holes cut out of them, but a group of white nationalists gathered in Washington over the weekend at the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center 3 blocks from the White House, where Richard B. Spencer, who is credited with coining the term alt-right, said that Trump's election has been an awakening. This is what a successful movement looks like. And this movement denies that it is a rebranded version of the Ku Klux Klan. They're just white people who want to be left alone. Yeah, they're not evil, they're not racist. That's how they try to spin it. But here's one example of a person who attended, 29-year-old Robert Taylor. He said he used to work for Ron Paul's presidential campaign and moved to New Hampshire for a project that evolved from the Ron Paul campaign. And he said, I thought I had all the right answers and read all the right books. He said, I heard about the alt-right movement and it just lit a fire in me. And one critic, John Patty, says, I characterize them as the shirt and tie arm of the white supremacist national movement. Now, Donald Trump and his top advisor, Steve Bannon, have not commented on this. They claim that Bannon is not a white nationalist. He's just a nationalist. But I want to thank our listener, Willem Gruters, who lives in the Netherlands and surfs American websites. He went to this article at the concourse. I've linked to it in the show file for today's podcast, and it exposes the white nationalist group Stormfront. It's the Internet's premier watering hole for white nationalists and neo-Nazis everywhere, and is one of the biggest fans of Steve Bannon. And if you click on the link, you will see the Stormfront logo. White Pride Worldwide is their slogan. And when you scroll down and read some of these blog posts that have been made by members of this group, here's a description of Steve Bannon, a loving one. He's a racist, anti-homo, anti-immigrant, anti-Jewish, anti-establishment. He declared war on Paul Ryan. Sounds perfect. Muah-ha-ha-ha-ha. The man who will have Trump's ear more than anyone else. Being anti-Jewish is not illegal. Nothing you dirty, stinking Jews can do to keep him out. And when we scroll down a little bit further, we see a post from an individual who uses the handle Hungry Brain. To the victors go the spoils, says HB. Here's what they're calling for: replacement of the head of NPR with a white nationalist. Destruction and bankrupting of the Soros organization, just like the Southern Poverty Law Center did to the Aryan nations. Wow. Now, I don't like George Soros for a lot of reasons, but to equate him with the Aryan nations and that they were a victim of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Hungry Brain wants Hillary put on trial and then writes, I'm used to liberal hypocrisy, and once again this is an example. Where was the outrage when Hillary blamed the Flint, Michigan water crisis on white suburbs? Isn't that a racially charged comment? They are, of course, silent because the insult was directed against whites, a race that the Judean establishment hates. Let the Bannon appointment be the beginning. Make the establishment feel the pain of their loss every day. Do to the establishment what Martin Luther said to do to synagogues. Burn them down, dig up the foundation, and scatter the rocks so that when you're done, it's as if it had never existed. That's what has to be done, mercilessly. And then there's a little tagline at the bottom of this, looks like a quote that he includes on all of his posts. It says, "The Jew cries out in pain as he strikes you." There's one more anti-Semitic screed here, written by Save Australia from Invasion, so we can suggest that this is not an American comment. And there's a quote there, and then he says, this filthy Jew writer goes on and on about the plight of the poor non-whites, yet associates anything to do with whites as bad. Whites have achieved and accomplished more than all other races put together, and that's a fact. As a race, we have so much to be proud of. Donald Trump's win is going to bring out the white pride in ourselves. There's no doubt he has Jewish ties, and I'll never overlook that. But look at what's happening so far. He's employing racially aware alt-right people. He's been praised by nationalist leaders in Europe. People who once judged him are now sucking up. I think Trump's victory will allow whites to feel pride in themselves, even if he's not a white nationalist. After 8 years of Obongo SJW, and I'm not sure what that is code for, running rampant and white guilt, I think things are changing, but whites worldwide can never get complacent because the disease is being treated, but it's not eradicated. Wow. Now let's take you to North Carolina, the laboratory for election fraud in this country. And let's look at how Republican Governor Pat McCrory is refusing to concede his obvious loss. His opponent, a Democrat Attorney General Roy Cooper, has a statewide lead of more than 6,500 votes. But the Republicans are scrapping, county by county, looking to declare fraud, find somebody who voted twice, and their comments are almost cartoonish, as we have heard from Greg Palast in the rationalizations for voter suppression tactics. A spokesman for McCrory's campaign said there were known instances of votes being cast by dead people, felons, or individuals who voted more than once. And a spokesman for the other side said, well, the governor has set a new standard for desperation. And get this, they're in Durham County, right? That's where I believe Raleigh is located. And the Democrat is leading by 90,000 votes. He's got 59 percentage points. But the Republicans are scrapping ballot by ballot, trying to change that margin. A lawyer for the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, Allison Riggs, said they are silly, small in number, poorly researched, and the claims are often defamatory. So compare that with the complacence of the Democratic Party and the Hillary Clinton campaign. You've heard Greg Palast, citing the work of Jonathan Simon and his own investigations, declare that this was a rigged election. It was rigged for Trump. And in critical states like North Carolina, not to mention Michigan and Wisconsin, there's serious questions about whether Trump won. But the Democrats aren't pursuing it. They aren't going ballot by ballot, county by county, trying to figure out if the election was gamed. They've just given up. And occasionally, as you know, I like to take a look at two angles on the same story. And today, I've got 2 articles by the same guy, a man I respect. His name is Ari Berman. We interviewed him back in August about his latest book about voting rights. And he is a staff reporter for The Nation magazine. So in The Nation, he edges up to suggesting that this election was rigged with the headline, "Did Republicans rig the election?" And he answers the question by detailing the ways that Republicans used suppression tactics in at least 14 states, how they took advantage of the Supreme Court's neutering of the Voting Rights Act to require photo IDs, and he uses some really strong examples of how people, particularly elderly people, were denied the right to vote because they didn't have the right type of ID. And he goes on to detail what happened in Wisconsin, which is where he focuses his article. Says that turnout in Wisconsin was at its lowest level in 20 years and fell by 52,000 in Milwaukee, where 70% of the state's African-American population lives. All right? So turnout, which could be also an effect of suppression, lowered turnout down by 52,000, and Trump has carried the state by only 27,000 votes. So if a little more than half of the people who may have been blocked from voting in Milwaukee were permitted to vote, Trump would not be reported as the winner. And I want to make a note here for listeners that in my description, I do accept the mainstream notion that Trump has been declared the winner of this election. But I don't believe it. And so if you're confused or you feel like I have gone back and forth, I apologize. But we live in this strange world where there is the official narrative that's in the corporate media and that politicians accept, and then there's the truth. And there are times when it's hard to keep separating the truth from the official narrative. And so that's Ari Berman, article number 1. Then he has a commentary that appeared over the weekend in the New York Times where he frames the issues of voter suppression, rigged elections, and election fraud as something that could happen in the future. And he focuses on the Supreme Court and and John Roberts' role in neutering the Voting Rights Act, and asks, what could happen next. And so the nation has a history of ignoring election fraud. They covered it in 2000. They wouldn't cover it in 2004. Ari Berman is really the only reporter there who covers it. And when his work gets picked up by the New York Times, it's watered down even further. Well, we need to stand up and recognize the reality here. But we are left leaderless and rudderless and kind of just whistling past the graveyard. Every day I like to pause for a second and thank the people who whistle my tune and who support my work with your subscriptions to the Peter B. Collins podcast. People like Judy Holloway, Craig Baylog, Linda Gray, Steve Wozensky, Sarah Kramer. They are regular subscribers. In fact, let me just separate. Sarah actually took out a 24-hour pass, probably to listen to the Tom Frank interview over the weekend. So I hope you will stick around, Sarah, and thanks for sampling the Peter B. Collins podcast. I'd like you to join in, too. If you'd like to help me absorb the costs of this move, that'd be particularly thoughtful at this time. You can make a one-time contribution via PayPal. Just link it to Peter at peterbcollins.com. You can also take out a new subscription. You go to peterbcollins.com, click on Menu, pull down, click on Become a Subscriber. It takes you to the sign-up page, and you can choose a comfortable level for yourself, $5, $10, $20 a month, the $50 annual subscription. Whatever you decide to do, I appreciate that you're listening, and I thank all of those who support me. Well, it is a time for a change of the guard. Nicolas Sarkozy, the president of France, the former president, has conceded defeat in an effort to reclaim the presidency there. And it is 2 former prime ministers who edged him out. François Fillon got 44%, while Alain Juppé got 28%. Sarkozy got 21%. And, of course, they're fighting to reclaim the conservative flag there in France. And this guy, Juppé, appears to be the most normal. He's not an exit guy. He's not extreme about Muslims. But he came in second in the three-way race there. And the finals will be next spring in the general election in France. Also, Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, has announced that she will seek her fourth term next year. So that is a kind of steady-as-she-goes approach. And Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of Britain, who was discredited for being George W. Bush's lapdog, is making noises about re-entering the public arena. Here in the United States, there is talk that President Obama might sack the head of the NSA and the Cyber Command, or at least take one of those jobs away from former Admiral Mike Rogers. He's only been on the job about 2 years, and apparently the beef is that he hasn't done much to combat the Islamic State. And over the leaks that have occurred from Ed Snowden to this guy who was picked up in Maryland in August, and we don't know too much more about him except that he collected a whole lot of classified material at his home. So the recommendation to remove Rogers has been made by Defense Secretary Carter and the current Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. Now, this is complicated by the fact that Admiral Rogers met with Donald Trump last week and is rumored to be in line for the Director of National Intelligence job, while I reported last week that the Republicans are planning to eliminate the job of Director of National Intelligence. So it's all kind of confusing, and it's possible that Obama might make a move to fire Rogers, and in the next breath, Donald Trump might hire him back or hire him to a new position in the intelligence community. Also, Democrats are now seeing James Comey, the FBI director who screwed Hillary with the email back and forth before the election. They're hoping that Comey will be an ally in countering the extremism of Comey's new boss, Jeff Sessions, named Attorney General, not yet confirmed. But I think this is a bad bet. Jim Comey is an independent operator who takes care of his own self. And I think his moves with Clinton reflected that. When he thought she was going to win, he said, we don't need to investigate her. And when he thought she was going to lose, he decided, well, maybe we better investigate her. And the idea that he would be a backstop to prevent Jeff Sessions from authorizing the detention of individuals, new individuals at Guantanamo, or the resumption of torture, to imagine that James Comey is that kind of guy, well, I think it's ridiculous. That's the comment part of the News and Comment podcast here. And finally, this is a real stinker and a sneaky move. On Friday, I believe, while the new strongman who runs the Philippines was in Peru for that international conference where President Obama appeared, the new strongman, whose name is Duterte, had given permission for the Marcos family to upgrade the burial site of the former dictator, Ferdinand Marcos. And Imelda was there. The picture does not allow us to admire which pair of shoes she pulled out of the huge closet of her collection. But Ferdinand Marcos left power in disgrace. It was a disgrace when Jimmy Carter gave him effectively asylum in the United States. And the Philippines has been through a lot since Marcos. But to essentially restore his honor by allowing him to be buried in the cemetery, which is called Labingan NGMGA Bayani. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I don't really speak Tagalog. But at any rate, this is the equivalent of the Arlington National Cemetery. And they gave him a full burial ceremony, as I said, with Imelda hanging out there. And this is the way that Donald Trump, I believe, will try to rewrite history. He may not rebury anyone's body, but he is going to disinter the torture program that Obama tried to put the kibosh on. He's going to bring back, he says, torture. And the people who he's hiring will run roughshod over our Fourth Amendment rights in terms of domestic surveillance. Obama has left him with unlimited power to target and kill people with drones, including American citizens. Dark days, not just here in the United States. Thanks for listening to my News and Comment podcast. It's available free every day and on YouTube as well. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.